Welcome to the NYC Libertarians podcast.
Yep, it's a podcast of NYC Libertarians where we talk about liberty, our pursuit of it, and
Liberty,
its lack
New York
thereof.
City, the interaction of the two or the lack thereof.
And if you're tuning in via video right now, you'll notice that we've upgraded to having that as an option as well. So now this hopefully will be on YouTube. I don't know. Are we supposed to look at the camera now that there is a camera?
You could look at the camera.
All right, I'll look at the camera. I think it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. Either that, or I'm just going to be like looking into your eyes over
Yeah,
here.
you can also move in a little off frame.
It's a little uncomfortable. All right, that's fine. That's fine. We just got to get used to it. This is what showbiz is all about: getting used to things that are mildly uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Hey.
so we have beer. We're back from the summer break. We took August off.
Yeah, did you have a nice August?
I had a pretty good August. I went to visit family in Germany and Switzerland. Switzerland, by the way, is one of the more free countries.
Yeah, we should put the Swiss strategy for freedom on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, they're not perfect. They passed some stupid law banning minarets and some other idiocies.
Minarets, huh?
Minarets.
Yeah. That for our friends is what people put on their mosques. So they've got like a pretty serious anti-mosque thing going on, anti-Islam thing going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's Europe.
Yeah, it's true. It's in these days. Okay, well, that's cool. Yeah, I went to California. I went to Burning Man. It's not my first time there. Actually, it's maybe something we should put on the agenda too, because boy, is that a libertarian paradise.
Really? I wouldn't think so.
Right? I mean, it markets itself as such, and there was some New York Times article talking about the economics of it, which I haven't read, which I should have read, because I could critique it here. But it is, it's
Burning Man crypto.
It's a lot of freedom and anarchy out there, and it's very voluntary, and it's an absolute pleasure. I find it quite inspiring.
You don't find it commodifying?
It's anti-commodified. It's decommodification, core principle. No, I mean it's a real trip. It's a real trip. I highly recommend it for folks who don't mind being like a little bit dirty, like to camp a bit. It's okay, and are interested in seeing like libertarian, anarcho, voluntarist recreation, because it's happening out there in a way. And I've been to Pork Fest. I've been to other like freedom style festivals.
Oh, I haven't.
Yeah. Well, Pork Fest is probably worth going to first.
I'd go to Pork Fest, but I think it's trafe.
Yeah. No, it is. It definitely is. I mean, there's also... Yeah, it's a little trafey. It's definitely a little trafey. But...
That's mostly a joke.
I know, but it's also... Have you been to a barbecue? It's pretty trafey.
All right, so let's.
They love the bacon out there. They do.
All right, that's enough banter.
There's
for
vegetarian
now.
stuff too, I'm sure.
All right.
I think you'll find it all.
And by the way, if you don't know, Pork Fest is a like liberty festival in New Hampshire, where you get a bunch of libertarian speakers, and meanwhile you get like kids doing arts and crafts AK-47s.
What?
Yeah, I saw that.
What do you mean? Arts and crafts with AK-47s?
Like you make like a wooden AK.
Okay, you're like making them. Yeah, I mean there are a lot of firearms there, that's for sure. And it started by the Free State Project, which I don't know if we've talked about on the show, but is probably one of the most ambitious and least discussed political projects in the U.S., where back in the early 2000s, a bunch of libertarians said, okay, let's pick a state, and then when 20,000 people pledge to move to the state, we'll all move there, and then we'll transform that state into a libertarian paradise. And they actually triggered that pledge, I think, a few years ago, and thousands of people have moved to the state. A few of them are running, or have actually won state elected office. Some of them on the Libertarian
you
party
don't need
line,
many
but mostly
people to
Republicans. No, and one of the reasons why they picked New Hampshire is because it's got the lowest per capita citizen to legislature ratio, and so it's pretty easy. I mean, not easy, but it's a lot easier to become a state legislator in New Hampshire than it is most anywhere else in the country. And and it's the live free or die state. I mean,
it's like winning school president.
Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I mean, they fight pretty hard to get those seats. Mostly, they do it as Republicans. Not so many on the Libertarian line. I think actually all on the Republican line. except for one.
I mean,
who switched over and then lost.
we had 3 at one point.
Yeah.
And then one lost. I know. I don't know about the other 2, but they all defected. They didn't.
Right.
They weren't elected.
Right. They all defected from Republicans to Libertarian, and then hopefully that becomes a more successful strategy in the future. Anyway, but yeah, PorcFest is it's definitely an interesting time. Also, the Agora Valley's there. There's a lot of like free commerce that goes on. It's interesting. It's interesting. It is, I guess, in some ways the Burning Man of the East, which means it's very much not like Burning Man. But in spirit, it's well, you are camping. So that's.
I wonder if I can rent a tiny house. Oh, I want to talk about tiny houses.
We could talk about tiny houses.
My girlfriend and I have been watching a lot of Tiny House.
I've been watching Tiny House vids also. It's
the thing that they don't tell you is how and this is very libertarian, is how difficult it is to find legitimate or semi-legitimate parking for your tiny house.
Oh yeah. Well, yes.
Like in all these
it's
shows,
not just parking.
All these shows, they don't show you or tell you how difficult it is to actually find a place to put your tiny house.
Right. Even if you own property, in a lot of places they're making it. They have made it or making it illegal, and they existed in the loophole being like, oh, it's like a mobile home, but now their regulations.
No, but mobile homes are also incredibly regulated.
They're regulated, but not as much as tiny houses. At least I can tell you in my dad's small town in California.
I mean, only because the tiny houses are not accommodated for.
Right.
So you get all these zoning codes and building codes and zoning restrictions that just don't have a provision for tiny houses, and then you just don't have a place to put your tiny house. And then there are all these like message boards online of people trying to figure out where they can put this and like who is actually friendly to putting to.
Did any of the Democrats who've been talking all about housing talk about tiny houses at all?
Mm-hmm.
Not even Yang. Yang should have a tiny house platform.
The new in vogue thing is a homes guarantee.
Right.
Although some people have actually, Bernie and Warren have come out actually acknowledging that restrictive zoning plays an issue. Yeah, which is very which is good, but it's buried in
all the free housing that someone else is going to make.
Yeah,
somehow.
But the most, I mean, just in terms of talking about the presidential candidates in housing, the most I think depressing thing is even though they're seeing the light on a lot of these things, all the plans involve still the dream of home ownership. Like it's all about opening up home ownership to
even Bernie's plan. It's not like a state-run public housing.
No. His plan is all about a route for minorities and the oppressed to get to home ownership, which is just such. For a bunch of revolutionaries, this is incredibly counter-revolutionary thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were going to rebirth public housing, and instead of towers in a park, they were going to have.
There is some of that, yeah, but that is a more urban.
The more urban side.
It's more urban than they're currently ready to endorse. Mm-hmm. But also, they just are still under this mindset that you should have access to. That the only wealth is in homes, and they should have access to it instead of the actually revolutionary thing, which is to realize that wealth should not be in homes. We should stop having this stupid bias towards putting all the wealth in homes and then just allow it to function on the market as it should.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that they aren't pitching like architectural plans of the next version of towers in a park and whatnot, like an urbanized, like a highly urban, York, highly technical.
Yeah. In New York, we deal with those people.
Regiment, but like, there's no. You'd think that just shows you. I mean, in a lot of ways, that shows you how much consensus there is around not having giant government home building programs again. That even Bernie isn't saying like, hey, why don't we just build all the homes like we did in the 50s?
Well, I don't think it has gotten there yet. I think there is a group that came out with a homes guarantee from New York that is very much urban policy, but it's complete wishy-washy. It doesn't have anything, and it also is the problem with what is affectionately called the FIMBYs, the public housing in my backyard, is that even in this plan, they want to preserve neighborhood character so that they don't actually want to build on existing structures. somehow they think that they can create a bunch of new housing purely through infill, which is like alleys or cemeteries or gas stations, and it's just not going to happen.
I mean, certainly not New York. Our gas station situation in the core is pretty limited.
It means that they're not going to do anything in the core.
I mean,
they're not going to do anything in rich neighborhoods like the Village, that are underbuilt, and they're just going to do nothing essentially.
Right, which is par for the course.
Yeah.
Anyhow, well, that's good that we didn't go through any of our agenda items thus far.
Okay, all right. Our first agenda item is that we had a recent Siena poll in New York State.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Bill DiBlasio polls at 0% in his home state and
I think there was one person who supported him out of 300 and something.
Yeah, it's one person who is Catholic and earns under $50,000 a year.
Yeah, it's pretty much they call it out, huh? Like when there's only one of you out there. Like someone got that phone call. People are like, "You think it was Jim? You think it was Jim?"
But I've seen on Twitter there is one like kind of middle-aged Asian lady who also said that she was going to vote for DiBlasio.
In what? Oh, like on Twitter.
Yeah.
And like from New York.
From New York. Yeah.
Yeah. So DiBlasio's polling at basically 0% in the city. Which I don't think. Actually, I think that probably surprises no one, right? I would say that's some of the least surprising news that you're going to hear. But it's definitely embarrassing for De Blasio, and I wonder like where. I mean, so the mayor hasn't been around. The mayor hasn't been around. He's quite unpopular.
He's worked 7 days.
Right.
Of the last.
Was
month?
it 7? No, it was 7 hours.
Oh, 7 hours.
He logged 7 hours, I think, in August. As mayor. I mean, it's an embarrassment. It's actually really embarrassing. I mean, this is, so I'm running for public advocate. And so, one of the things when you're like a third party candidate that isn't like a conventional style politician that does other work most of the time, is that you get a lot of like, I'm ignored a lot. I'm ignored, even though I columned, I was in a column, Gotham Gazette column explaining my candidacy. I'm getting very little, no journalists are reaching out to me to even ask me my opinion. And, when you have, it's as if when they don't recognize that, like, we're in a political crisis here, or at least that our politics are so embarrassing, like, maybe we should try something new, and that maybe that just means at least talking or having any type of interest at all at politicians that aren't the same politicians that have put us in the situation where we have a radically unpopular mayor who was reelected by like 60-70% by with competition from a Republican Party that doesn't actually compete, that has a core inside group that like gets paid and has careers and like doesn't try to reach out and like kind of build grassroots support. And so like we have a very embarrassing and sad political situation in New York City, and yet the media has no interest in people who are trying to challenge the system. And so it's like, well, what's the solution? What solution do they see?
They're very cynical.
I understand why they're super cynical, because the situation's sad.
Yeah.
But you'd think that the job of political journalists would be to, when the solution's that sad, at least take their head up a little bit and be like, maybe what we're looking at, what we've been doing hasn't been working very well, because people who are very unpopular are getting reelected by massive amounts. And like, is there anything else going on? Are there any other stories? And the only other story is kind of like that they are interested in is the DSA story, right? So salutes to,
electorally, yeah.
Right, electorally.
I mean, they concentrate on other things like activist groups, policy
of course,
reforms.
but that's the same stuff that it's always been.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a little, it's a little disconcerting. I kind of wish we had like I hope we get like the Andrew Yang of mayoral candidates in like the 2021 cycle. Just someone, or the Marianne, right? Or the Marianne, like someone who really like just can successfully shake the situation up enough where the political journalists are interested at least in any type of alternative to the Democratic run status quo that's producing extremely mediocre results. But we're in reality, and so when we talk about mediocre results and like a lack of mayoral leadership and like kind of leadership in general in the city. I think that brings us nicely to the transit situation here and kind of a juxtaposition between, on one hand, we've had this tragic string of like bike deaths and pedestrian deaths too. I mean, even just this week we had some pedestrian deaths, cars jumping curb.
A baby. It was a car.
Two people in the last week, right?
Yeah,
2 weeks.
A car. Most recently, a car jumped a curb, and a baby was hit
and died. Right?
Yes.
Terrible.
And a week prior, it was another person on the curb, and the NYPD was quoted as saying, "We think that they were looking at their phone at the time." So it was like blaming the victim.
Yeah, the NYPD, but then also an NYPD guy just got killed too. He was
on his
motorcycle.
Yeah.
So there's this weird like string of
but if you put a motor on two wheels and it's not electric, then it's fine.
Well, then you're one of us, or then you're one of like the I don't understand. But I mean,
But anyway, the city needs to legalize e-scooters. The city needs to accommodate bikes. It needs. My philosophy on transit forms on the street is that people are entitled to use whatever form of transit they want to, and it is the responsibility of the city to accommodate all of them as much as possible.
But I think I that seems reasonable. I think we're in a situation like there's one thing when it's bikers getting hit, and there were a string of bikers earlier this summer, right, getting hit.
Well, we mean cyclists.
Cyclists,
not like motorcycle bikers.
Although I don't follow the motorcycle numbers, but yeah,
they're mostly self-inflicted.
Yeah.
The cop was definitely
a proper accident.
Yeah.
Cyclists is one thing. We got pedestrians the other, and then if you travel around the world, you'll notice that in sophisticated European-style cities and in developed world cities, there's a lot more design thinking applied to the interaction between sidewalks and streets and bike lanes. And that we've got, for a while under Bloomberg, at least I remember, and I don't have like data to support this, I just have experience. Under the Bloomberg administration, they closed a lot of streets down and they painted a lot of streets and they were doing it felt like they were doing a lot of
the vast
innovation
majority of bike lanes that we currently have, the protected bike lanes, were from the Bloomberg administration, as well as the pedestrianization. So I think the biggest problems with the bike lanes is, one, not enough of them are protected, meaning that like if you put cones outside of a bike lane, it's gonna be pristine. It's not gonna be touched by cars. But we don't do anything. We have a painted line, and then suddenly you have a bunch of drivers who don't respect the bike lane at all. And the thing is that it's not really the driver's fault. They need to be forced to simply get used to the fact of the presence of bikes. And that is the responsibility of the city, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then the other big thing is placard abuse and cars parking in the bike lane.
Well, you got cars parking in the bike lane just because, and cops not doing much about it or not caring because they identify as drivers or whatever it is.
Yeah. The cops all commute from like Long Island into the city.
And then you get your placard abuse situation where they have to all park somewhere, and so then they park illegally and pretend like it's not illegal because they have a placard. And then the borough president...
And that is full fraud. Right, you just take your placard, that license thing, and you print it out, or like you use a legitimate one, but not for your vehicle that you registered it with.
Yeah, no, it's basically there's a huge. We've got like kind of basically. It feels like a streets crisis, where we've got pedestrians getting murdered, like being killed.
Yeah,
right? Maybe even murdered deliberately.
But last year we had 16 bike deaths, and now we have like 20.
Right, and like what's happened? And we're only 7 months, 9 months in.
Yeah.
What? So something. What has changed? I mean, it's hard. And the mayor ran on Vision Zero, right, which is this idea that we could have 0 deaths, kind of by car.
Well, you know what his answer was. His answer...
I can't even. Yeah, I do know. It's so
His answer
embarrassing.
was that we should license spikes and require helmets.
I want to see the Democratic Party get behind that, because that's when I think the Libertarians might surge to the front.
But you know what that means? It's inconceivable. It means you can't have City Bike, which is our bike share program. That's like very successful, and everyone loves it.
It's hard to understand how he said this.
You can't have that if you have licensing, because tourists can't get licensed.
I mean, it makes no sense that he would say.
You can't license a child. Then
bike dealers, like people who sell bikes.
But also
probably.
helmets. By the way, helmets is entirely paternalistic. Helmets don't help anyone who's not the biker and then a cyclist, and the cyclist can take on the risk themselves. Furthermore, it's been proven that what's most important about safety is not the helmet. Helmets are definitely help, but not as much as just more people biking. Right. When you have more people biking, you have a culture that appreciates their presence on the road, and then everyone gets safer. And that is far more important than all the people who would not bike because they don't want to bring a helmet.
Yeah, there was a comment on Twitter, a tweet as they call it, from a Dutch person saying like, yeah, helmets are really useful. That's how we know who the tourists are. To stay away from them, because in the Netherlands there's so much biking. No one you should look at the bike that no one wears helmets in the Netherlands. Amsterdam's filled with bikes, no helmets. Only helmets are the tourists.
Yeah, and I looked it up. I was arguing with people on Twitter, and Vancouver. I think it was Vancouver or Calgary. They actually passed a helmet requirement.
Really?
And they have a bike share. And the bike share apparently got figured out how the heck to deal with it, and they hired some firm to create a very cheap kind of disposable helmet.
The cheapest, like it's like a little cardboard.
Thing
to just.
Well, it's not quite that, but the thing is, like, these are all going to get stolen or misplaced. So and
they're probably not. The efficacy of them is probably extremely low.
Yeah. So, but what they're having trouble with is that they're incredibly misplaced and stolen or whatever. And so without those helmets, you can't actually have people use it. So they have massive accessibility problems. And then especially in minority neighborhoods where it's more prone to having things being stolen, and which it creates, a huge disparity.
It's a terrible idea.
And then the helmets also don't fit everyone.
Yeah.
They try to make it fit as many people as possible, but it's also an accessibility issue. And who gets hurt there? Like women, children, people like elderly. Like this is
people with weirdly large heads.
Yeah, I also have a weirdly large head.
Me too.
I don't really bike, but anyway, these requirements are just idiotic. It's and then Corey Johnson, at least. Our Speaker of the City Council, he recognizes this and he dismissed it out of hand. So,
so it seems like Corey is like stepping out as the walkable streets, global style street, person, right? And yet DiBlasio ran on this whole Vision Zero thing, but he's nowhere to be found, right? So. Except saying outrageous stuff about how we need like bike licenses.
And just to be fair, we do have people who are in like the outside of the boroughs or Staten Island who are very much car culture people, and who would probably not like our talk about preferring bicyclists and everything. But I think this really gets down to a core issue, and I also have my issues with congestion pricing. So.
Well, speaking of core issues, I mean, if you look around at just basic best practices and how cities are being run, like the core of cities, they are all over the world. They're pushing bikes out. And it's not because it's a part of some complicated progressive agenda to make people less free or something. It's because they've looked at the numbers. They've looked at what makes successful cities. They've looked at what makes successful retail districts. They look at public health considerations. And like what people report as being popular and what tourist numbers show and tourist
and
all these
environmental
things,
issues,
and environment. All of these things point to cores of cities having a lot less cars, having more and better mass transit, but also like not just walkable streets, but like pleasant streets, pleasant places, placemaking.
Yeah.
Pleasant ways, like easy ways, easy safe ways to move between 5 and 15 miles an hour using
yeah
bikes, scooters,
and
like
I'll
that.
rest again on my libertarian premise, which is that everyone has the right to use whatever transit they want. If they
What about horses?
Including horses. If you invent a new scooter and want to go outside and use it, you should be able to do it and not be fined or arrested. It's ridiculous.
I would like to see in the city kind of the standard application of not just a bike lane, but like an alt vehicle lane. Like too much rests on the bicycle only, but we've got these e-scooters now. But they're also, there are other types, and increasingly as technology makes kind of prototyping things easier, an increasing amount of like alternative modes of personal transit. And it would be really nice to see at least like a little sandboxing around like what could come of it. Then again, I was also just at Burning Man, where like one mode of transit is like a fire-breathing octopus.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get like a hyperloop or.
I was talking more about I was more on the fire-breathing octopus.
I think there could be a
slow.
I would propose getting like having more L's again, maybe.
L's.
Elevated trains.
Oh no.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
We got to think out of the box.
We definitely have to think out of the box.
I don't like the stupid alarmism about helicopters, but
yeah,
that's another thing.
They're annoying.
Yeah, they're kind of really annoying. Loud. But there's all these people who are just like, oh no, they crash, and then it's like, well, that's those people taking on that risk. Why the hell do you care?
They're loud. I find them loud.
Well, I mean, most of the helicopters we deal with are news helicopters.
You got news and cops.
And news helicopters are all about traffic. And traffic is all
cars.
about all the people who aren't allowed to live in the city and have to commute to the city. It's all linked.
It's all linked. Speaking of all things being linked or lacking linkage, right? The MTA came out with their plan to improve the links, the mass transit links, and it's a...
And here's what it is. It's not a plan.
No, wait.
It's the same plan that they had before.
Well, it is a plan. It's the same plan, right? It's the same plan.
It's the same plan.
The plan is always, let's just spend even more money. Lots more money. And then if we spend lots more money, then when that plan fails, we'll be able to do it again and spend even more money. Then everyone gets paid.
Yeah.
Except everyone gets paid. But everyone also has to.
And we also have
bear the
cost cutting, which is actually not cost cutting.
It's one of the things that I talk about in my campaign when anyone lets me, when like the media isn't particularly interested in, but when what I like to talk about, what I would talk more about in the press and the public through media channels that apparently aren't that interested in hearing it, is that there is a thing called digital transformation. All of these organizations are information management organizations, particularly the MTA. All of them have structures built around old technology, and they have bureaucracies embedded. The technology embeds a bureaucracy as it is, and it costs huge amounts of money, is completely not transparent, et cetera, et cetera. And so unless there's a digital transformation agenda for the MTA that just starts tackling the core bureaucratic structural issues around how information flows, you're not going to get significant cost savings. You're not going to get innovation. You're not going to get any type of change.
Well, we need procurement reform. We need design.
We need all the reforms. None of those reforms are going to happen until you start restructuring how the organization is laid out based around what's possible now with modern technology, modern software development, things like that. It's not like AI and crazy rocket science. It's more like, wow, if I can design the form and you can fill it out, and then we can put it through a simple workflow, we don't need this entire department of people doing all these things that need to keep their jobs doing all these things. So these people...
Yeah, but you're going to piss off the unions.
You piss off everybody, which is why no one wants to do it. But I don't understand what the media is so disinterested in looking at how bureaucratic reform can work.
They really are obsessed with just securing the funding. And I don't understand...
They're obsessed with money, and they're obsessed with the political horse race.
Yeah.
And like, if it's not one of those two things, they're like, it doesn't exist in their world. It's just political theater and money. And so, yeah, oh, wow, I saw the plan. It's like, oh, did we have $51 billion? If we had $51 billion to spend in the beginning, like nothing's changed in terms of the financial situation in the city since, we were having this conversation 6 months ago. Nothing's changed. Why do we even have this whole conversation about how screwed up the MTA is? It seems like it was all just a way for them to build enough political cover to be like, oh, we need to spend $50 billion over the next 5 years. Meanwhile, all the political commentators I read, probably the same ones, you probably read the same people, they're like, the MTA can't even spend, it doesn't even have the capability to spend that type of money.
Yeah.
Like, they're not even going to be able to spend it.
Well, they're
so
in
reform?
2 years, they're going to be running deficits. So, under the current spending model.
So we've got a transit leadership. We have a Democrat-controlled city completely. We have a leadership.
Well, it's not even controlled. That's the thing.
We have a Democrat. The Democrats run the political environment here.
It's Democrats
led,
but they're
popular.
Leading the
Right.
asylum.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. But I wish it were even inside. They're too boring to be in a proper asylum. It's just like DiBlasio is completely unpopular. Corey Johnson is the only voice.
It's like a fox guarding the hen house, but it's less a fox and more just like a fox that just sleeps all day.
It's like a old. I don't know. Listen, the whole fox. Who's the hen? What are the hens? The taxpayers?
Yeah.
It's like a team of foxes. There are a lot of foxes. There are a lot of foxes out there. They're just with the budget's at $92 billion. Things aren't improving particularly. The school system's not.
No one talks about that figure.
The
$92 billion. The next biggest municipal budget is like $14 billion.
It's really embarrassing.
It is such a magnitude higher. The
budget
boggles the mind.
It's as mind-boggling as the fact that only one person out of 350 would want the mayor to be president.
There's
three
biggest non-federal budgets in America are California, New York State, New York City.
It's sad. The reason why I'm involved in politics does not make my life easier or particularly better. And as fun as this is not as much fun as like other things I could be doing with my time. But I'm so embarrassed by the city that I love. I love this town. It's a great place. I grew up here. I'm so embarrassed that this is where we're at. And people think that someone else is going to solve these problems. And they just aren't, because the Democrats are just. You think AOC, the next generation of Democrat, you think AOC and that whole community is going to solve the structural bureaucratic problems? Like, no, that's the last thing. They won't even talk about it because they view that as a talking point for the right to reduce funding.
Yeah,
when it's like,
if they give an inch, they give everything.
Right. And so they can't even talk about the bureaucracy that needs to be reformed, which is the core problem in this entire environment. And so,
if you want to achieve
and then these people,
any of the goals that you actually want to with government, you need to make government actually work.
And the people, I work in government now. The people I work with in government, none of them think that like the AOC model is like appropriate, because they're all depressed and many of them have left their leave government work within 2 years because it's so scary. I have people all over. Once now that I've begun to work a bit and people understand kind of more people come to me with stories, like insane stories about how low it can go. Like how many people who need to manage information in government like don't know how to use spreadsheets. How leaky server rooms are. Like how absolutely undermining and depressed government workers are, and how they undermine any type of innovative new approach, and like what strategies you need to get them into rubber rooms so that they don't stop just basic improvements from happening. Like, people do not understand the depth at which the classic bureaucratic model is failing, and how there's an alternative that exists now thanks to technology that's not complicated, that's really just like forms and data tables and good process and good meeting running that could resolve these issues, but no one wants to talk about it. And the media
that's the absolute minimum. Absolute minimum.
And none of it's going to, if that doesn't happen, nothing's going to happen. Like, nothing ambitious will happen. And this is why people.
But we're here to try to make that happen.
We're trying. It's really unpopular. It's really just people don't want to get involved. and I understand why, but what are we gonna do? Like, we're gonna get to a point where the city's gonna be over $100 billion a year budget in like no time. Maybe
it's going to be the
2 years.
next recession comes around and we're at a crisis point.
Yeah, I mean, we're just sitting waiting for the crisis. This is like bureaucratic ineffectiveness and New York City bloated budget is like the climate crisis of of us. Like, we're just waiting for the ice shelf to melt and the flood to happen.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
but I really hope honestly that we can get some traction. I think if we get a critical mass of people, of activists, that we actually start drawing attention to the problems, and then maybe with time they get more, comfortable that they're gonna like. I don't know. But anyway, let's move on.
Hey, I have an idea. Let's just give housing to everyone. Let's give free mass transit to everyone. Let's give free healthcare. College debt. Let's just make everything free for everybody, and that'll solve the problems. And all we have to do is adopt modern monetary theory, which means that we can make as much money as we want because we're the government, and then we can give everyone everything for free.
Yeah.
Let's do that instead of having to worry about all these intricacies.
Right, let's not discuss MMT right now.
Okay.
Anyway,
that was fun.
fun. Big news. The big news.
What else we got?
Is that 2 days ago, Cuomo decided to get on the Trump train, and he banned flavored e-cigarettes or vaping.
Can we just end this podcast right now? It's all too sad.
Yeah.
I wish we should put up it's like, how many people are dying from cigarettes a year? Like hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, tens of thousands. Yeah.
Tens. Hundreds of thousands in the last decade.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of tens of thousands, you can guess. And then like e-cigarettes killed like seven people, 8 allegedly.
No, it's not e-cigarettes because e-cigarettes implies that you're using nicotine vaping.
Right. It's the flavored.
It's specific black market THC products.
That's what's killing people.
Which
they, I may or may not have experienced those products. They're fine products, but they did give me the.
Well, plenty more people use them than are getting sick.
Very few people actually. It's just getting sick, I guess.
Right. So in the scheme of
absolute,
things, yeah, but
massive influence of these e-cigarettes.
Right. I mean, many fewer people do THC vaping than nicotine vaping. And among them, you get a small amount who are getting sick because of the just unreliability of their
because they're in a black market.
It's a black market.
Yeah, it's a black market.
Cannabis is illegal in New York City. New York State.
Yeah, and so it's a black market, and guess what happens when you create a black market? The same thing that happened with liquor, which is that like sometimes, and like is happening with the opioids, which is that like sometimes suppliers
and people mess up.
Yeah, like use bad ingredients and people die.
Yeah,
which is whose fault is that? Like it's prohibition's fault. It's like it's the voters' fault because the voters aren't.
But every single agency that is supposed to be about public health, which is supposed to be looking at things objectively and assessing risk objectively, have almost willfully elided, or not almost, but they've willfully elided this crisis, which concerns black market THC packages and vaping in general, nicotine vaping specifically, in order to and teen and adolescent vaping, which is we've gone so many steps away from what that actual crisis is, and that is all elided together in order to just tell people don't vape at all, and in policy wise to ban flavored vaping at least, which kills the market because 90-something% of vaping is flavored vaping.
What is not flavored vaping?
There's unflavored and then there's tobacco flavor.
Like that's like with almond milk. It's like, is vanilla almond milk unflavored, or are you talking about the almond milk that's like just unsweetened only?
So you have unflavored, which is just vapor. I don't know why you would do it. is just there's nothing to it.
It's like hookah without the flavor.
It's vaping steam. And then you have a tobacco flavor, which by the way, like doesn't actually help people. The biggest thing that we haven't said about is the biggest thing about vaping is that it leads people to stop smoking. And the problem with tobacco flavored vaping is that apparently, I don't know, but I've heard a lot of people say this, is that you don't actually get off of smoking if the vaping is the same thing as the smoking. So if the vaping tastes just like tobacco, most of the people who vape tobacco are doing both, are both smoking and vaping. And a lot of people who try to use vaping to quit do so specifically successfully with other flavors that don't remind them of cigarettes than tobacco flavor.
These are the public health officials that are doing all this like great work, that are gonna give everybody free health care and do all of these these social mission like concepts, like we're really gonna improve people's lives, but we can't. Public health officials, they're gonna improve so many people's lives, but they can't stand up to these stupid lies around prohibition being effective or vapes being bad.
Yeah, can I lay out how terrible this decision was? So 2 days ago, the Cuomo announced this thing because, according to Cuomo, because of the deaths, he specifically connected the deaths with youth vaping, and said that youth vaping is this epidemic, that's a crisis. So the public health officials they went to this committee, which is a very obscure committee of the New York State Department of Health, that has this mandate that they can do emergency measures. So that committee held a hearing. And
so this is supposed to be probably like the Ebola, like should we quarantine under an Ebola crisis, should we quarantine this district or this airplane? And they're like listening to some, Barron Trump or whatever, like got caught vaping by Melania. And now this
or like you have some tainted meat or something, and then it's just like can't confiscate all of them. But so they have this. So they understood. They legitimately and outright understood that what their measure was completely unrelated to the actual THC deaths. They specifically only considered the teen and adolescent vaping epidemic that they call. And that epidemic, so they were also adopting an emergency measure that's 90 days, an emergency measure to ban all these flavors, except for menthol.
Except for menthol?
Except for menthol.
Okay. Wow.
Because Cuomo exempted menthol.
Brilliant! So, what a brilliant political tactician.
So there's a number of problems here, right?
I mean,
one is that if you're talking about teen vaping and youth vaping, and only about youth vaping and not the THC deaths, that is not an emergency. That is a phenomenon that has been happening for years.
Wait, teens smoking a cigarette? Like teens smoking?
Doing vaping, yeah.
Yeah, but like
nicotine vaping.
I mean, teens. This is what teens
They've been doing. Vaping has been around for years.
Forget vaping. Just teens. It was cool
they've
to
been
smoke.
smoking.
Remember when it was
right.
cool for teens to smoke?
Yeah, but they think... Okay, in their point of view, they think that they're responsible for... Because of all that propaganda, that they're responsible for the lower smoking rates. And vaping, if anything, hooks kids on nicotine, and then once they're done vaping, they're going to go to cigarettes. That's what they think. That has no evidence whatsoever.
I love how these people love to take so much responsibility for things like, did like a teen like do too much, vape too much, nicotine, blah blah blah. But then when things like mass incarceration come out, where these same type of bodies have decided to incarcerate 500,000 people for non-violent crimes that are just complete nonsense, they're like, we didn't know, like this was, or like they're like, let's study this because we don't want. It's just like this. It's so...
Yeah. They drag their feet on...
They're full of baloney.
On the things they don't want to act on, and they act
it's just
incredibly
politics.
quickly
it's just
on
politics at its
on
most...
this vaping stuff that There's no basis for. So one is that there's no emergency. By their own definition of defining the emergency, it is not, by definition, an emergency. It has been happening over years. They knew about it. There's nothing new. So it's complete BS. And they acknowledged that it kills the industry. Because you can't not sell...
sucking people out of the cigarette
You can't not
world.
sell 90% of your product for 3 months. And Cuomo has said outright that he wants it to be permanent. So what are you going to do? You're gonna
the voters
stop it being a business.
This is the thing. This is why I'm involved in libertarian stuff, because until the public understands that prohibitionist strategies are A, bad for public health, and B, used by politicians for utter nonsense reasons that are just completely like tactical. Like Cuomo made a political calculation to be on the right side of a news story, but then like it's like, okay, but not menthol, because like there's a whole other demographic.
So that's another
menthol.
thing, is the menthol. Exempting menthols defeats the whole idea that it's an emergency.
But there's no, where everyone's so cynical, there's the journalists, they don't even consider, it's just a horse race, and they're like, oh, we like his horse race move. It's like, people die.
People are going to die.
People are going to die from this
because they go back to cigarettes.
They're going to smoke more cigarettes,
or they don't go to vaping because they don't have the flavor that hooks them.
People are also going to be like, break the law. They're going to get caught. They're going to be punished. Other people are going to break the law and not be punished. And then a lot of the people who are breaking the law are going to use even worse vape fluids, even more dangerous vape fluids, which is going to kill more people. There's all these cascading effects. We saw this with alcohol prohibition. We've seen this with marijuana prohibition.
And the kids are still going to do it.
We've seen this with heroin.
It's already illegal, by the way, to vape under 21.
We've seen all of this happen. We've seen all this happen over and over again, but the media can't explain they can't explain why prohibition is bad in a way that makes sense. The public refuses to understand these simple concepts. And yeah, I would say it's quite frustrating. This has been a frustrating episode.
It's an extremely frustrating. Episode. And if you saw some of the they have it archived online, but some of this testimony that went in front of that commission, it was heartbreaking. It was all these people who were talking about their personal stories about how they saved their own lives
by vaping. By transitioning from cigarettes to vape.
Yeah, that they'd been smoking since they were 13 or 10. Like it's.
The public keeps electing these people.
It breaks your heart.
The public keeps electing them. The media can't explain that prohibition's bad. The government loves to.
Well, it seemed like the commission. It seemed like a bunch of the members of the commission were kind of sympathetic, but it was very obvious that they couldn't even allow themselves to be moved because they knew how they were supposed to come out at the end. Like that is their role, to be there to listen to these people or allow these people to vent and then just vote.
Embarrassing. On the list of embarrassments, maybe we should just call this podcast "Embarrassing Things That Happen That the Government Does in New York" podcast.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing I think is that it at least among the vaping community, they got very much wise to the general attitude that everyone has, and maybe we can grow the party a bit. Maybe we can.
Well, all these disasters. It's just been disaster after disaster of government doing stupid stuff that harms people and then pretending like they're trying to help.
Yeah.
And, we'll see. I mean, at least one thing that happened today, which I saw, which was nice, was Andrew Yang said that he would decriminalize opioids.
Oh, okay.
So maybe...
He also released his yearbook picture, and he said he liked the Smiths and the Cure.
Uh-huh. That happened. He wasn't in blackface for anything.
Right, that's true.
Yeah,
he did not. Oh my gosh,
Trudeau in blackface. I heard right before.
I didn't watch the apology.
Oh, right before we started, I read that there's more episodes of him.
He said it. Yeah.
Oh, did he?
And then there's a picture that came out of him in high school in blackface, not brownface.
Okay. Yeah,
apparently, that's a distinction.
Right.
It's
a lot. How are we doing on time right now?
We are 47 minutes, but there were a couple minutes before that.
Okay, so we can keep ranting and raving about all the terrible
So
What else we got going on?
Well, we already
here?
got a bit of a campaign update.
Yeah.
We can talk about that a little more maybe later. We have an integrated brand strategy for the city, which we're going.
All right. So yeah. So let's shift. So that was the depressing stuff that the city and the state are doing that are not libertarian and quite frankly just not
It's
not
just not
good.
s-
It's
no,
just dumb.
it's
It's just dumb things that are happening.
Even if you believe in public health, even if you believe in
Right,
the state,
especially if you believe in public health.
especially if you believe in public health, that the state has a legitimate role to play in actually improving health outcomes, regardless of what the structural issues.
Right. Regardless
this is
of
a
personal
terrible
freedom.
move. It's an
move.
embarrassment in the name of public
It's
health.
the DiBlasio of public health moves.
This is a move that it's like saying that eugenics is like a progressive policy.
Well,
And then 80 years later, everyone's just like embarrassed about it.
It's embarrassing. But fortunately, we don't have people aren't really dealing with history so much, so we're just it'll just go into the dustbin. But anyway, okay, in like proactive things that are happening, I mentioned my campaign. I'm not going to go through the 5 solutions. You can go into previous episodes to see the 5 solutions.
Here are the 5 solutions.
Here are the 5 solutions. Yeah, you can see them on the website at votedevin.com/platform. But other things that have been happening is that, as you know, or maybe you know or are aware of, NYC Libertarians is more than a podcast. It's actually an integrated branding strategy that we've been bootstrapping out of the abyss of nothingness. And we've got a lot of people who are beginning to kind of like help out with it. It's expanded way beyond us. And now we have an Instagram at /NYC Libertarians. We reorganized the Twitter. That's at /NYC Libertarians. There's a website at nyclibertarians.org and a Facebook page at /NYC Libertarians. So that was all
Yep.
older, like less organized libertarian media all coming together under this common cause of A, libertarians, and B, New York City. So that's good. This podcast is just one of the many a foot soldier in the
spoke
NYC
in the
Libertarian.
wheel.
Spoke in the wheel. Much better. Spoke of the wheel of the NYC Libertarians thing. And so, bravo. I'll give a shout out to Rebecca right now. Right?
Rebecca Lau is instrumental in this work.
Who's now the vice chair of the Manhattan Libertarian Party, has been helping instrumentally with the social media rebranding and like pushing content.
Oh, should we announce the ICOs?
Yeah, the ICO. So you want to do it?
So because we are a new party officially, we need to transition each of the county chapters into county parties in a way. So that requires a new convention, new rules. The Manhattan chapter had its convention last week. And I myself was elected chair. Thank you. Rebecca's my vice chair. We're going to move ahead with being a party. We're going to use it as a way to reinvigorate everything and move forward and have candidates. It's going to be very exciting. And
the Brooklyn ICO is going to be taking place at the meeting in October. Which means that we're going to be going through that same process. And we're going from being unofficial, now in the transition period, and ultimately to official status, which means we're going to have, as you might have heard in other podcasts, we're going to have a huge amount of ballot slots open, and we're going to need people to run because there are not enough people that want to run. There are not enough people that want to provide an alternative to the absolute
there are
embarrassing
over
joke.
150 positions coming up in
over the next 2 years.
2020 and 2021. And I just went to a city campaign finance board presentation, and I just want to make it clear that for city council in New York City, you need to raise $5,000 in order to get 8-to-1 matching funds. So if you raise $5,000, you'll get what's 8 times?
8 times 5.
40. You'll get $40,000 in total funds. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
That is a bigger impact than most libertarians around the country. So
it's a huge amount of money. So it's a great opportunity for
really
reasonable candidates, maybe some who have some type of media skills. People who have a mild following.
By the way, I would get on it very soon because the first distribution of campaign finance funds is going to be December 2020.
Wow.
So
Wait,
if
2020?
2020. So
That's-
for the 2021 election.
Okay. That's like that's like 15 months away.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have to raise by then enough qualifying funds. So if you start soon, if you start planning, it's very doable. We'll help you do it, and I think it's something that people need to start thinking about now. But it's it's very exciting.
I mean, it's a great opportunity. One viable libertarian candidate who can hit matching funds and push the message out it really will transform.
Mm-hmm.
It will transform the city because, it will break them through into the mainstream and the media here will not be able to ignore them. And if that person is
At least local media. Local media.
not national, but just local media will have to be like, oh, there's a libertarian alternative, and then once you have that I haven't been able to make that breakthrough happen thus far. There's still time.
Well, public advocate is much more difficult.
Well, that's $125,000 threshold. That's not happening for me. But I'm just saying, like, we have yet to get our day in the local media spotlight, even though we're the third largest party in the country and we're becoming official now. But someone will take us over that hump, and I will be there, and I'm sure you will be there too to help them do that. And so I hope folks consider
being that one,
being that person, and recognizing that, like, you can deliver a really powerful victory without winning the election, but simply by getting matching funds and being the voice that breaks through the fall.
And then once you get matching funds, I mean, you're honestly, there's no book. No one has done that. So it's more realistic than ever. They've lowered, the matching fund threshold for city council used to be 10,000. It is lower than ever. No one has made it before. You're really writing your own history at that point. Who knows what could happen?
Yeah, it's a real breakthrough opportunity in every one of the districts of the city. We could put, if we just get one through, it would be a big deal. We don't have to.
By the way, 3,000 can come from the candidate.
But then you need 75.
That's not qualifying yet.
Individual. Anyway,
okay.
Talk to us if you're interested. You can go to nyclibertarians.org. There's a form there where you can register your interest in being a candidate, and then we'll talk to you, walk you through all these processes, and help you out.
All right, should we talk about some visitors we had a couple weeks ago?
Oh yeah, in this very office, we hosted Nick Sarwark and Dan Fishman, who are, if you're not a libertarian fanatic, you might not know, Nick Sarwark is the national chair of the Libertarian Party, and Dan Fishman is the executive director. And they came here before Nick Sarwark battled with Dave Smith, a relatively popular comic and podcaster, about,
and apparently a big Mises Caucus
and a big Mises Caucus guy, about most people don't even know what that is.
Yeah, they're like hardline libertarians.
Yeah, call them what you like. But they're of the Ron Paul ilk. Okay. Yeah, they battled at the Soho Forum over, like, what the future of the Libertarian Party should be, and it was fun. I think Nick lost technically and very slightly to Dave Smith.
I think it was more than slightly.
But no, it was pretty.
Well,
slight.
they both picked up a lot.
And from percentage, I'd say Nick actually won in some ways, but in terms of, like, most valuable, like, most improved.
No, I think it was David.
Whatever it was close. It was like within 3 points or whatever. Anyway, who cares? I mean, I don't care. Nick cared mildly, because he's a guy that keeps score like that. But anyway, yeah, that was interesting. I mean, the main debate that like, the way I interpreted that debate, it was kind of the debate versus, it was like the activist libertarians like Dave, who, like, aren't hampered by the realities of running politicians to get votes, versus the political, pragmatic people, Nick, who have to do that. Like, the whole point of the party is to get votes for candidates.
Yeah.
Candidates and get.
I mean,
votes
I
for
think
candidates.
you could put me on Team Sarwark here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the debate itself, which you can see on YouTube, I think it was just posted to YouTube.
Yeah, Reason put on YouTube. So
Yeah.
Reason TV has their YouTube channel.
I think it's a little. It was a little more aggressive than I would have hoped. Like I think that it would be nicer if the activists and the politicians basically like worked together to achieve a goal.
You think
you know?
libertarians don't go after
Right.
each other?
But it was certainly interesting, and people came from far and wide. A lot of the people there, I like flyered it because I was like, oh, there are going to be a lot of libertarian voters here. Most of the people there were not from, literally traveled from outside of New York City, even
Yeah.
in New York State, to watch the battle of these. I guess they're titans, yeah, it was fine. I think they both made good points. I wish it was a little bit more reconciliatory, or conciliatory rather, and
Well, these
that's my
internet
position.
scene debates. Back when Gary Johnson had debate all the other presidential contenders, and
Yeah.
it went all about like how can you dare support driver's licenses?
Right. Yeah, it's nothing new.
We had a nice after party at a New York Libertarian luminaries apartment.
Yeah.
And there
He
was
was more of an activist, not very involved in the political side of the Libertarian Party here.
Yeah, I interact with him
Unfortunately.
on Twitter sometimes.
Yeah. That's something.
Yeah. And it was a good time. It was a big Liberty Fest. It's interesting to see the people who are on your team when you're kind of alone most of the time, at least around here.
Yeah. And also people who share the brand and like are part of the team but aren't particularly interested in getting votes or getting candidates or running,
Yeah.
that type of thing. It's a it's a bizarre,
Except it was about the Libertarian Party.
I mean, the whole thing was about the Libertarian Party. There was very little, how do we work together to advance the party, and a lot of like, you're wrong, your strategy's wrong.
Yeah.
It's a tough. I mean, to me, it's just kind of so obvious that the political solution would be the least kind of political people around, would be delivered by the least political people around, and that the challenge is getting people who really don't want politics to be invading their lives, getting those people to let politics invade their lives so that they can activate a political movement that can free us from the banality of government incompetence and like petty political nonsense.
I think people still fear that the LP is all they have. So they still use the LP as just their like cultural bulwark, not just a political movement.
What do you mean?
Like,
You're saying people who aren't involved or
who are involved but don't actually want electoral victory. They use the LP as just a way to have, their interaction with libertarianism.
Oh yeah, that's yeah, I think that exists. I mean, I think there's the other side too, which is that people who spend all of their time being libertarian personas and like build a career around libertarian stuff, not wanting to be involved with the LP at all because that would somehow be not very libertarian of them to like be involved with like a political party.
Yeah,
It's a wide spectrum of kind of complicated reasons why things aren't more organized and effective. But I don't know, something's gonna happen. Right? I think so.
You mean for 2020?
Something's gonna happen. There's gonna be breakthroughs. Like I've said before, I think on this show, there'll be a congressperson that comes out of the Mountain West, the purple mountains as people call them. There'll be maybe it'll be Justin Amash runs. Like there will be a rush of attention.
Michigan
and
is not mountains, but yeah.
Huh? Michigan? Yeah, no, not mountains. Sand dunes. Indiana's got some sand
No,
dunes.
I love the Indiana dunes.
Yeah, I had a nice time there. But anyway, yeah, so there will be a breakthrough. Something's going to happen. I think, something's going to happen. I think it'll probably
Gary
be
Johnson already had like way more than anyone else.
Yeah, we've been building the numbers. The numbers have been going up. It went from 0.5% to 1% to 3% over the last few election cycles. So there will be a breakthrough, and then that'll be that. And people like us, who knows what'll happen to.
Yeah.
But
well, I just yawned.
yeah, I think that maybe that's an indicator of. Do we hit all of our agenda points? Basically, I would say so.
Yeah, I think we did. Until next time.
Next time I think we're gonna we tried and failed to have a guest this week, this show, and that's too bad. But I think we're gonna
maybe we can have a special episode.
We'll have some guests. We'll have some episodes. Now that we've got this whole video thing underway, I guess this means we're gonna be on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And so things are moving along. And,
so just remember to vote Devin.
Vote for Devin
November
on
5th.
Yep, November 5th.
Before November 5th, if you're free, volunteer for Devin.
Yep, that would be,
donate.
Interesting. Yeah, we've got a lot of nice palm cards to hand out. Yep.
Thank you. I'm Ilya. He's Devin. Thank you to Eliad Shapiro for the intro music, which I always forget to say. And we'll see you in Liberty.
In Liberty.
Goodbye.
Ciao.